the dozen ballroom, there's hope for all among those love the most.
Hi, I'm Jason Crazy Bear. Welcome to the Jason Crazy Bear Show, where my hope is to bring a deeper respect and understanding locally for the world's many indigenous tribal cultures and traditions through the people that practice them. For one, to honor those elders and ancestors that kept these traditions alive and also pass them on to our younger generation and make sure that they don't go away. So I'm very excited today to have a good friend of mine, an elder, Mr. John Blackfeather Jeffries. Hey, John, how you doing?
Doing good, my brother.
Welcome to the show,
Thank
man.
you. Thank you.
So I guess the first thing I'd like to ask is, like, how long you been a part of this local community?
Let's see. I was born on the Eno River back in 1939.
So quite some time.
Yep. 67 years.
And your family, how far do they go back in this area?
Well, my grandfather's people go back into the 1600s. They migrated over here from England. My father's people came out of Canada in the Ohio River Valley. We call it the Ohio River Valley. And the nearest they can figure is right to 1300s when they came out of Ohio and they settled down in what is now Virginia, Clarksville, Virginia. And so I know they can go back to 1600 because that's when Jamestown met them.
So you part of the Occaneechi people?
Yes, I am.
And how long have those people been just locally in this area?
Well, John Lawson met them in Hillsboro on the Eno River before it was Hillsboro in the 1700s. But they came down to Hillsboro, made several trips before it was Hillsboro. And that was after the rebellion of 1676 up in Clarksville, Virginia, which is now Clarksville. And they moved down here and they moved back and forth. This was a hunting ground too, part of hunting grounds. So they came back here after the rebellion of 1676 and they established a village in Hillsboro. And they were met in 1701 by John Lawson. And then the Europeans came in 1715 after John Lawson passed the word, and the Europeans started coming in. So they came in 1715 in Hillsboro. Our people were still here.
Right.
They said, well, they moved out. Well, they did about maybe 10 miles because there was nothing but woods around here then. So,
Right.
so the Indians, they stayed between Hillsboro and what is now Durham, and some in Greensboro.
Okay.
Down in Chatham County, it wasn't just Hillsboro.
Spread out.
It was a hunting and fishing grounds, yeah.
Okay. I had heard one time that there was also a lot of trade going on.
It was a trade village. The one in Clarksville was a huge trade village up there. It was in the middle of the, actually it was Dan and the Roanoke and the Stanton River came together. And it was an island with 750 acres. I have a photograph of that island at the house before it was inundated in 1950 by Bugs Island. But they came there and fished with the and traded with the Occaneechi. The Occaneechis were a pretty prosperous group of people. And they were very proficient in a deerskin trade. And so they traded ammunition, and spices, sugar, and salt. These kind of spices with the Occaneechi. Well, the Occaneechis had catches, huts up there. They call them catches, full of barbecued deer and fat bear. And also they had corn, beans, and squash. They had dried medicines from the earth up there, dried fish, everything, you know.
Yeah.
That was a local Walmart.
Right. So, are you full-blooded? I know you love that question.
Oh yeah, I got 16 pints.
There it goes. I thought it was 9, but 16.
You got 16 pints.
Did you come from a big family?
My father had 13 children, and then they raised one. And my mother's family, they had 13 also. Big family. They had to have big families to survive.
Right.
And my father's people, they were farmers, tobacco farmers, and they grew all kinds of vegetables. I remember as a child, I used to go with my paternal grandfather when I stayed up. He lived in Caswell County at one time, then Alamance County at one time. But in Caswell, I used to stay with him in the summertime.
What kind of man was he?
He was a Baptist minister, but he was a stern man. In the Jeffries line, he was the first one since, I guess, Simon Jeffries was up in Clarksville, Virginia in the 1700s. And he was the first Jeffries whose first name wasn't John. So when he was born, his mother named him Bartimaeus Goliath Jeffries.
Oh,
That's a mouthful.
that's a powerful name.
And then the next one was my dad, John, and all of his brothers. And then dad and mom just had, I'm the only child.
Okay.
And so they named me John, and my grandson, my son was named Sean from the Scottish. We thought we had Scottish blood, but we don't. But I named him Sean. And then I got my grandsons, my granddaughters.
Okay. So what was it like growing up in local Hillsboro back in those days? I'm sure it was a smaller area.
It was segregated. They had about, in 1950, they had about 1,200 people. So it was a small town. We had actually 3 high schools. We had one white school was in West Hillsboro, and the other white school was in Hillsboro. And my school was called Central High School. But you have to understand that Hillsboro, when I was coming up, it was a small town, but we had industry there, 2 textile mills. One was known as Bellevue Cotton Mill, and the other one was known as Eno Cotton Mill, cone plant.
That's where all the jobs came from?
Yeah. We also had a furniture store there known to, it's White Furniture Company. A White Furniture Company made, what you may call unfinished furniture, and it was shipped to Mebane, and they was finish it. But my life in Hillsboro was just, I guess, in a small segregated town.
Right.
Well, we were known as if you wasn't white, you were colored.
Okay, so you got lumped in?
Yeah, lumped in. So in Hillsboro, we had 2 sections. We had what we called across the tracks. Well, the tracks ran from east to west.
Right.
So the town, well, we were north to south, but when you cross a street called Nash Street, everything was dirt, no paved. And that was where the mill people stayed. And Nash Street, I lived right off Nash Street, and our street just got named in the 60s called Latimer. But everybody that lived over there in the hill, in the hill area, across the tracks. And so they had a theater down front, and it was called the Gym Theater, and they had another one in town called the Osborne Theater. But both races could go to each one of them. But West Hillsboro, they call it, was the mill section. They had a lot of mill houses that were built over there by the mills to house the workers. And so where I lived, it was integrated just about.
Right.
Because where Daddy lived, there was a white family and lived across the field, we call it. And then I had relatives living on Nash Street. And both sides of Nash Street had white and colored.
So where you live now is actually where you lived when you were young?
Oh yeah, I lived in the house my mother and father built in 1938.
Oh.
Yep.
Right on. So when was the first time that you learned about the traditional part of your heritage, your legacy, I would say?
It was a guy over in Chapel Hill. He was going to UNC. He came out of Maryland. and he was the Nanticoke tribe, but he never did discuss it because his grandfather owned the Coca-Cola company or Pepsi-Cola company up in Maryland, and he's pretty well-to-do. He didn't have to call home for no money.
Right.
You know? So Forrest was studying over there, and he also joined the rescue squad in Chapel Hill at that time. And so this was back in the 80s. And so Forrest went up to Pleasant Grove, and he met my dad. And he met some more people up there, and he told me, he said, these people don't look like they black people. And so he had to study them because a lot of our people, you know, they would identify as Cherokee. That's the only one you know.
Because that's the recognized
That's
one
it.
in the
That's
state.
what the government did to us.
Yeah.
So, so he started looking around, and after I met him, I was on the rescue squad in Hillsborough. And so then Forrest, he started researching this, the Jeffries name. And so he ended up in Pleasant Grove. Well, a lot of the Jeffries, look, good gracious, people up here they're not black people. They look like Indians that I know. So he kept researching. He went to Greene County, Virginia, and he went all over Virginia. Matter of fact, he went to Indiana. He found a lot of the grave sites in Indiana.
Right.
He visited graveyards. And so he came back, and he just said, you know, he didn't tell me, he told some of the elders. He said, your people come out of Virginia, Greene County, Virginia, up in that area, and Mecklenburg, Virginia. He said, and your people were Occaneechees. And so we started doing research and found out he was absolutely right. So in 1953, they got together up in an area we call Redland, but it's Mebane Oaks Road. And they organized the Eno Occaneechee Indian Association. Well, we had powwows up there. They had a powwow the next year. I didn't go to that one. Well, I went to it, but I didn't go down far enough.
You got lost?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, where I thought it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
I was on the right road. So I went to a meeting of the tribal council, and then the next year they had a powwow. And I was there. So my wife was with me, and the drums were pounding, man. They were knocking. And so I saw them dancing. And so I just stood up there at the east gate. My wife came up and said, so why don't you go in? I said, nah, I ain't going in. So I had a walking stick. I was in Scouts for years. So I had my walking stick. Everybody said, man, that's a nice looking acoustic you got there. But I went in to dance, and I've been dancing ever since.
Okay.
Yeah. And the next year, yeah, it was 85, 86, I had a booth set up. I made crafts and things. This was in a year's time.
Right.
And I was selling crafts, and I had a bear skin and a old buffalo robe the guy had given me. I met a lot of traders now that's just gone.
Right.
And I talked with them, and I learned a lot of stuff. I had one good old buddy. He was a Chickamauga Cherokee. His name was Jim Pierce. And Jim was just as country could be. Jim had more stuff there than a flea market. All of it was native.
Right.
I saw a buffalo robe. I really liked the buffalo robe. It was
Skins
beautiful.
and crafts and everything.
Yes, crafts, bows and arrows, and yeah, we have some World War I relics up there. But and I remember he had an old wolf that Jim had stuffed because he had some wolf dogs at his house. He lived in Carlisle, South Carolina, right on a game preserve, and you know he was part of it. Right. And they had a lot of exotic animals down there.
So you had mentioned that it was segregated when you were younger. Were you in a segregated school system as well?
Oh yes, oh yes. That was in the early 50s, 40s and 50s. And I graduated in 57. But yeah, we didn't have a gym. We had a basketball team, but we didn't have a gym. We had to go down what they call a white gym. which at that time was a pretty good little hump down there to where we had to go because they hadn't paved roads up there where we were. So right now you can go down there in 15, 20 seconds.
No.
But we used to go to the white gym and play basketball, and then they had to. We didn't have a activity bus at that time, so they had to use one of those school buses to go locally to play.
Right.
I played baseball. I didn't play basketball. It was too short. But
And then what was the first thing you did out of high school?
well, I got out of high school in '57, and Mom wanted me to go to college, and I wanted to go, but I worked with my cousin. His name was, they called him Pete McPherson. He was a contractor. Most of the men in the family at that time were brick masons and stone masons.
My family
But
as well.
I worked for Uncle Pete, and it was a hard job running them bricks and blocks.
Yeah.
And so I helped build a gym down at the white school. And then I helped build a gym at the color school. That was before integration. But then in 1958, I decided I went to A&T College at that time. At A&T College, the board of directors were relatives of mine from Alamance County. John William Jeffries was an agricultural farm agent up there in Alamance County, and he went around to people, the colored neighborhood that they call it, and he would advise them on crop situation and so forth. So I went up there 58 and 59, and I was in the ROTC, Air Force ROTC drill team.
In high school or?
No, in college.
Oh, in college.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in high school, I played baseball and worked at a shoe shop. I was shining shoes, learning to fix shoes at the shoe shop. But anyway.
So did ROTC kind of lead to your military service?
Yeah, in a way. I was up there in 60. And we had a game up there, and we had to perform on the field. So me and a couple of the guys on the drill team, I said, man, I can't focus up here. I just can't focus. I said, my grades were falling. And I was also in athletics. I was a water safety instructor, and I taught a little archery. And I was on the baseball team in college. But it just didn't, I couldn't focus. At that time, A&T had woods behind the place. And I heard rabbit dog running. My mind wasn't on college, man.
Yeah.
So I came home, and I went down to Durham. No, it was in Hillsborough. I saw a Marine recruiter. I talked to him, and he painted the picture like it was. Because my Uncle Dave down across the street had just got out of the Marine Corps in '58. And my mother knew all what he went through at Parris Island. So when I told her I was going to the Marine Corps, her heart dropped. She said, no. I said, look, I can't take you and Daddy's money. I said, Dad's working hard over there at that cotton mill. I said, and you doing domestic work, I can't do it.
Right.
And so I left for Parris Island, South Carolina, October the 30th, 1960. And the first week I was in there, I could focus.
I bet you could. You picked the toughest one of the four, right?
But people tell me I'm crazy, but I didn't. I enjoyed my time in the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. I got to see the Caribbean. I was down there during the Cuban Missile Crisis and so forth.
Yeah.
But my scouting years helped me out a whole lot.
So you had been a scout as a young man.
Oh yeah. I was in the Boy Scouts. I made Eagle Scout, and had summer camp. It was fantastic, and I enjoyed that, being out in the woods and stuff.
And you had told me a story about how the Marine Corps kind of led you back to the scouting.
Well, see, I was in scouting when I was in high school. Oh, you're talking about? Yeah, okay. That's a story. That's where I met my wife at a Girl Scout camp.
Yeah, that's
Is
it.
that the one?
You met Lynette.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, when I got out of the boot camp, I was in October, November, and December. I was in Thanksgiving and Christmas. But when I got out of boot camp, I came home, and then they sent me to radio telegraph operator school in Virginia.
Okay.
I was a communicator. That's what they told me I was going to do, and I went and did it.
Right.
And so I came back, and I had a weekend pass. Didn't have a driver's license. I rode with just, he was a warrant officer, Gunnar Davis, and he would come to Chapel Hill to UNC. He was going to school also. So I drive up with him the weekend. So my mom and dad, and I worked at Girl Scout camp before I went in the Marine Corps for 2 years. So when I came back, I went to Girl Scout camp to see the staff up there and just talk to them. And I walked in there and I asked camp director, I said, Jerry, her name was Geraldine. I said, Jerry? She said, yeah. I said, what's the water? Why can't you guys are not out there swimming and all that stuff? What's the canoes and all that were up on the bank? We don't have a waterfront director, Jeff. I said, what? She said, we've been to all the colleges. We can't find a waterfront director nowhere. And so I said, all right. So I got back home. I called the base. Of course, when I told them I wanted to work at Girl Scout camp for a while, well, anyway, when I got back down there,
They thought you was crazy. Yeah.
yeah, I got back down there. They told me the base commander wanted to see me. I said, for what? Gunny said, hell, I don't know. You must have screwed up something. So when I went in to see the base commander, of course, he had my jacket right there on it. He didn't know everything about me. So he said, I was a PFC at that time. Maybe PFC got a boot. He said, Robert Jeffries? I said, yes, sir. I heard some disturbing news about you. I said, what is that, sir? He said, stand at ease. He said, they tell me you were ready to get out of the Marine Corps and go into Girl Scouting. I cracked up. He said, well, you know, we got a Boy Scout troop here, but it seems like they're in dire need. So I'll tell you what, we're going to send you temporary active duty, and you're going to be a recruiter for the Marine Corps. We're going to spend you 60 days at Girl Scout camp and 30 days at Boy Scout camp. So that was 90 days, man. And he said, but you're going to have to keep up your training, your basic, because when you get back, we got another assignment for you. And so I did. That's where I met my wife. She was a counselor. And she said that her mother told me this. She said there was nowhere for my daughter, and she was a freshman in college. She said there's nowhere for my daughter, my two daughters, she and her sister, to find anything in Charleston other than domestic work. And she said I wanted them to go out, branch out a little bit, get out of Charleston. So she went to Orangeburg, South Carolina State College. And so I went up there, and I set up the waterfront, and that's where I met her. I don't see how I got her, because I aggravated the hell out of her.
So I just want you to know it's been an honor to have you today, and I want to know so much more, and I'm sure the people do too. So I want to ask you if you could come back and film with us another day and continue this.
I'd love to.
All right. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, brother.
So this
Sure.
is Mr. John Blackfeather Jeffries of the Okanichi Saponi people, and I'll leave the people with Ahoma Takwiyase, which means all my relations, or we are all related. Thank you.